Good morning. My name is John Becknell, and I'm here with Deanne Weary, and this is the first in a series of videos that we'll be creating in webinars to talk about emotional psychological well-being for first responders in North Dakota. And our topic today is how can we best help our people today? And Deanne is a paramedic and an EMS educator and a professor at Bismarck State College. And I work with first responders all across the United States around this topic. And I'm really glad that we can be with you today. And so Deanne, I'm just really curious. You're out there both in the streets with people as a medic and also as an educator. Why is this topic so important today and also important to you?
So it's important to me because in being an EMS for as long as I have seen many of my friends and colleagues just have stress, the stress of the job, of being first responders, have a rather negative effect on their lives. And I think that we have to change that culture, that we have to, it's important for us to not be telling EMS providers to toughen up, that they signed up for this job and that it shouldn't affect them, because it does affect us. So this topic is very passionate to me because I think we have to better take care of one another. We have to better teach our new EMS providers along with our old EMS providers. I don't mean old in age, but old in experience, how to better take care of our mental fitness and prepare better for the abnormal stressors that we see.
So I love that, but I'm going to be really practical. It's really hard when you have a room full of EMTs and paramedics and EMRs to actually get them to really care about taking better care of themselves. I mean, what I often see, and I want to know if you agree with me, but what I often see is we don't really get serious about this issue until there's either a big event or we have somebody in our organization who has a crisis, either a substance abuse problem or even, God forbid, but a suicide. So we often are just kind of reactive to this, and it's really hard to stand in front of a group of EMTs and paramedics and EMRs and say, hey, you guys should take better care of yourself. Why do you think it's so hard for first responders to take better care of themselves?
I absolutely agree with you. Why do I think it's so hard? I think that because we are caretakers. We are most often focused on taking care of others. And I think that we forget to take care of ourselves. Yeah, does that make sense? And I also think that in the classroom, for me, when I'm talking to EMTs and paramedics, I feel that they're kind of looking at me and thinking, you're a crazy lady. We want to see the cool stuff.
And let's tee off of that, because I think that you just really hit something that's really important. I think here's what I'm learning. As I work with cops and firefighters and medics across the United States, it's really doesn't resonate with them to stand up in front of them and say, going on difficult calls, working long shifts, being in 24/7 operation is going to turn you into a mental basket case. They first of all, the statistics tell us that's not true. uh, for the majority of our people. And the second thing is that they don't want to hear that because of just what you said. We like to see ourselves both as helpers, rescuers, and we take care of everybody else. And we assume that we're going to be okay. And so here's what we're learning, and I'm curious what you think about this. Here's what we're learning is that to answer today's question, how can we best help our first responders today, is to not spend a bunch of time talking about stress, overwhelm, PTSD, substance abuse, depression, but instead help them focus on their experience. So what we're learning is that when we have first responders who have a better daily experience, in other words, on more days than not, they're driving home from work or after their shift, feeling positive about what they've done, feeling positive about themselves, that when the big stuff comes, they're more resilient, they're able to stand up to it, and their families pay less of a price for them being in there. So what we want is on a daily basis, EMTs, medics, EMRs who are motivated, experience more satisfaction, and drive home feeling better about themselves and about the work that they've done. So how does that sound to you?
Absolutely. How do we do that, John? How,
Well, yeah, say more about that question because that's kind of the $64,000 question, right?
right, right. Can you give us suggestions for that?
So here's what I think. I think first and foremost, we have to change the way we're talking about this. And I think we have to begin to think differently about the whole thing. So what we've done is we've wound up presenting seminars on stress management, on big events, on PTSD, all of that kind of stuff, and all that's doing is turning people off. So I think what we have to do is change the way in which we're thinking about this. So a way of reorienting our thinking as leaders and people who want to help first responders is to begin to think about this as being about mental fitness. And if our people are mentally fit, we know that they are going to, when the tough stuff comes, they're going to respond to a different. So a good way to think about this is to think a little bit about physical fitness, right? So physical fitness isn't automatic. It is something that we work with, and physical fitness is not a state that we suddenly arrive at and then we don't have to do anything more with it. So the same is true with mental fitness. So mental fitness is this being in tip-top shape or the best shape that we can be for whatever is ahead. So so the first thing I think we have to do is reorient the way in which we're thinking about this. And the best way to think about mental fitness is to begin to think about how do we help our first responders have a better daily experience. So that starts with, so I'm curious, when you hang out with both your students and in the field when you're working as a medic, what do you hear? What do most of what's the biggest complaints you're hearing?
So it depends on where we're at. If we are, the complaints that I hear with colleagues who are working in the field, I hear them complain about the, for lack of a better way to put it, the bullshit calls.
Yeah, right.
The BS calls, that come in the middle of the night. the long transfers, uh, those, I don't hear them complaining about the big events. I hear them complaining about the day-to-day stuff. From
Yes, so that's where
students,
we have to start.
oh, huh? I'm
That's
sorry.
where we have to start.
Yes.
So how can we help our people today is to get interested in their experience today. So one of my first suggestions is simply to begin to start helping our first responders focus on their experience. And one of the ways to do this is to start a conversation. And it's a simple conversation that asks this question. Are you enjoying your EMS work as much as you hope to or as much as you used to? So
Right.
this question, I'll say it again, are you enjoying your EMS work as much as you hope to or as much as you used to? This question is simply asking people to be reflective on their experience today. And likely we're going to hear the stuff that you just talked about. Just talked about the BS calls, the calls that are the 911 abuse, or we're going to hear the conversation about sort of what we call the operational BS, you know, like, oh, I have to work this shift, or oh, we have to go on this transfer, and it's just going to be a 3 or 4 hour drive, and all of that kind of stuff is the stuff that is what we find is eroding people's experience. So the first thing is to get people to start talking about their experience. Now, the problem with that is you're going to hear a bunch of complaining, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I'm curious about is what do you think most people are going to say when we ask that question of, are you enjoying or are you as satisfied with your EMS work as you hope to be or as you used to be? What do you think we're going to hear?
I'm not sure, John. I'm trying to think of the people I work with. I think that we're going to hear no, that they're not as satisfied as they had hoped to be.
And likely what we're going to hear that goes along with that. So I agree with you. That's what I'm hearing is the no. And then what we're going to ask, if we ask the question of why, we're going to hear about all of this stuff, right?
Right.
The irritating calls, the short staffing, the lack of support from the community. We're going to hear about the long transfers. We're going to talk about the healthcare systems that they feel are abusing them by making them do psych transfers in the middle of the night that aren't urgent. All of that kind of stuff. That's what we're going to hear about. So the interesting thing about that is that a lot of that stuff is out of their control.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's where we get back to this whole idea of mental fitness. So mental fitness, again, is this whole idea of being in the best shape possible for whatever is thrown your way. So a way that we begin to talk about that is if we want to have first responders have a better experience. So if the answer to our question is how do we help our first responders today, what's the best way to do that? If the answer to that is to help them have a better daily experience, then the work that we have to do is help change the way in which they're experiencing the stuff that they have every day. Now, this is hard work, right?
Oh, it is. Yes, it is.
Because the problem is that it almost seems too simple. Because what we're going to ask people to do, and I'm going to make several suggestions here. is the first suggestion I'm going to make is, if you want to help the people in your organization, simply start a conversation about how they're experiencing it. And what you want them to do is just to begin to put into words how it is that they're experiencing it. And the question about, are you enjoying it, or are you as satisfied as you used to be or as you hope to be, helps them be reflective on what they're doing. So the follow-up question to that, so Deanne, if I ask you, are you enjoying your work as much as you used to, or as much as you hope to, and you say no, follow-up for that is of course the why. And then I'm going to hear all of the reasons why. But underneath that, what we can begin to do is help people focus on what's out of their control versus what's in their control. So that leads to my second suggestion, which is, really going to be help our people focus on the stuff that they can control.
The stuff they can control?
Yeah, so let's talk about that, right?
Right.
Because in the course of an EMS day, how much stuff's out of your control? Tons, right?
Yeah, most of it.
Do you get to choose what calls you go on?
Not usually.
Yeah. Do you get to choose what the patient's going to be like?
No. No.
So, and you don't really even get to choose what's going to happen when you get to the hospital. You don't get to choose if it's one of those dead days where all you do is sit around and wait and wait and wait. So there is so much in the EMS day that is out of our control. And here's the human nature. The human nature is that it is really, really easy to spend our time and our energy focused on the stuff we can't control. But here's the deal. When we focus on what we can't control, we're almost guaranteed to have a more miserable day.
Well, yeah, I would agree, because we're focusing on negative. So, and negative feeds more negative.
And let's think about this. What does it make you feel like when you spend your time focused on stuff you can't control? Does it make you feel more empowered or less empowered?
Less power, because you feel frustrated.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it.
And so I know this is going to sound really, really simple to people, but when we spend our time, energy, bitching, moaning, whining, and complaining about the stuff we can't control, our misery index rises. We feel, yeah, and we're much more likely to drive home from work feeling like it was a wasted day. Like, why did I ever get into EMS? So one of the ways we help our people, and this is simple and absolutely the hardest work you'll ever do, which is to help our people begin to focus on the stuff they can control. So I'm guessing you wonder, if you're the typical skeptical paramedic, you're going to say, how do you do that?
Right. Right. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I don't want to pretend that we're going to walk in and in one meeting change our organizations. So, and we're not going to change EMT medic EMR behavior overnight. But here's the deal. The deal is that if we're going to help people focus on the stuff that they can control, it will be an ongoing conversation. And it has to be done gently and kindly. So if you and I are working together and you're really frustrated because now it's 3 o'clock in the morning and now we have to drive for 45 minutes to pick up a patient who's a psych patient that we're going to haul to Bismarck, and likely we'll drop the patient off, and before we get back to our station, the patient will probably be released and be on their way back too. Okay? So
Likely.
yeah. So if we're working together, we're working together, what about that situation can't we control, or what about that situation can we control?
I can't control that. It's part of my job and I have to do it.
That's right. Can
Yeah.
you control the patient? No.
No.
So let's talk about what you can control.
Okay. I can control my emotion about it.
Hmm.
I
Maybe we're going to debate you on that. Maybe you're frustrated and angry. But what can you do with that frustration and anger?
I can turn on the radio to something I find enjoyable.
That's right.
I can listen to a podcast that I find enjoyable. I can be grateful when I look up in the sky and see that there's not a full moon.
So I love what you're doing, because here's what you're doing. You're beginning to turn your attention from the stuff you can't control to what you can control. And here's how this works out practically. What it works out practically in our organizations is when we ask the question, are you satisfied with your work as much as you used to be or hoped to be? Or are you enjoying your work as much as you used to or hoped to? And the answer is no. And we listen to the complaining. I had to go on this 3 o'clock in the morning stupid site transfer, all of this kind of stuff. What we need to start building into the culture of our organizations is a conversation where we help one another say, okay, I hear you. You can't control all of this stuff and it's really pretty miserable. But what can you control? What can we do? And here's what happens. This is the small change that makes the big difference over time. The small change that makes the big difference over time is when people slowly begin to realize that they do have just what you said, the capacity to do very small things like, as you and I are driving to pick up this patient, rather than spending the whole time bitching, moaning, and whining and complaining, we spend our time focused on something else. It's really been nice working with you tonight. It's really been nice. And it's helping people. And this sounds like Life 101.
Yeah.
But it is very basic stuff of helping people, because here's what happens. When I focus on the stuff that I can control, what's that do for me internally? When you focus on the stuff you can't control, because I'm sure as a teacher and as a field medic and a professor, you have tons of stuff out of your control. But what happens when you focus on the stuff you can control?
It makes me feel more grateful. It makes me feel more in control.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which in turn makes me feel more secure and happier, more comfortable in my skin.
Yes. Yeah, so this is the best thing that we can begin to do to start helping our first responders is to reframe. And today we just talked about a very simple one, which is pay attention to your experience. Am I enjoying it as much as I hope to or used to? And then focusing on the stuff I can control. Where we put our focus will often determine the quality of our day. And if we can help one another begin to focus on on the stuff they can control, the misery index will go down. Because here's the deal, I don't know that short staffing is going to improve in North Dakota. I don't know that we're going to get the attention and the funding that we need for EMS to be better. But just because those things make our people more miserable doesn't mean they're going to develop PTSD and fall off the edge of the emotional psychological cliff. Likely not. And if we tell them that, they're not going to believe us and they're just going to shut down. But if we start talking to people about having a better day, what if you could drive home from work experiencing your EMS role more positively? That might help people change. What do you
Yes.
think about this approach?
I think that this is what we need to be doing. Oh, I think that we can help each other be more mentally fit, like you say. We can, yeah. I think that for myself, I'm not gonna lie, it's frustrating because it takes so much, it takes a lot more effort to encourage people or get people to focus on the positive rather than it's like our brains, our psyche is a magnet to negative. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. And you're absolutely right. This is the hard work, the hard work. So imagine this, imagine that you had an EMS organization that was more oriented toward the positive than the negative. And this is really hard because to be a good EMS person, a good medic, a good EMT, EMR is to focus on the negative. Imagine the worst thing happening, prepare for the worst thing happening. But when we begin to start turning this around, so here's the suggestion, because I love that you were honest enough to say it's hard in your own life.
Mhm.
So here's my last suggestion for today. My last suggestion is if we want to help our people today, it's not only changing the orientation toward thinking more about mental fitness than breakdown, and also beginning to start helping our people evaluate their experience and focus on the stuff they can control. But I think the most important thing we can do is ask ourselves, am I practicing mental fitness in my own life? Do I have a practice? Am I doing something as simple as paying more attention and turning my focus to the stuff that I can't control versus the stuff that I can't control? So our encouragement is if you want to help your people, get in the game yourself.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that I feel like the one of the best characteristics of leadership is leading by example. So I think it's important for us to make that change.
And one of the things I appreciate about you, Deanne, is that rather than go out and proclaim something that you don't experience in your own life, I know that this is something that you are working on in your own life, which is to say, how do I not feel that I'm a victim of whatever circumstances come my way, but that I'm actually have some capacity to be a change agent in my own life.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you talking today, and we just uncovered one little portion of this, and in the upcoming webinars and videos, we'll continue to talk about this whole idea of mental health and how we can help one another and help our organizations and help the first responders all across North Dakota have a better experience. So thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us work on this important, important topic, important issue here in North Dakota. I think we can make a huge difference for our first responders.
Great. Thanks, everybody.